Well, good morning. It's wonderful to see you here today. For those of you that are visiting for the first time, welcome. My name's Mac. I'm one of the pastors on our team. It looks like we have about 2/3 of our congregation on spring break. So if you're watching from your vacation spot, welcome to you all as well. We're in a series right now that's helping us prepare for Easter, and it's called A Different Way, subtitle, A Life Marked by Freedom. So, the basic idea is that as followers of Jesus, as the church, we're called to live differently than the world around us. We're called into a different way. In many respects, we are to be a countercultural community, a contrast community, a community that contrasts with the world around us. And what we're doing in this series is we're naming that at least part of that involves living free from the many things that hold our current culture captive or hostage. So this different way, the Jesus way, is a life marked by freedom. Each week we've been looking at a countercultural, Jesus-centered practice that is designed to help us live into this freedom. Like our culture is shaping us one way, a way that leads to bondage, and these are practices that help us lean into and actually experience the freedom God designed and desires us for. So quick review. We started by talking about waiting on God. Waiting on God frees us from the bondage of control into a place of trust. Then we looked at generosity. Practicing generosity frees us from anxiety and greed and helps us live into abundant blessing. Then we talked about prayer. Prayer frees us from self-sufficiency into a place of God dependency. And then last week, Cameron talked about fasting. Were any of you able to do a fast this week? Okay, one of you. That's awesome. How'd it go? Yeah. So fasting, what it does is it frees us from comfort, and then it catalyzes us into areas of new growth and connection with God. This week, we're going to look at another countercultural practice, and it's rest. Rest. When I was in high school, there was this girl that drove me absolutely nuts. And the reason why is because she never stopped moving. And so I'd have classes with her, and one semester was really bad because it was like almost every class I had with this girl, and she'd constantly be moving, and usually it was her leg. So it wasn't like just a foot tap. You'd look over, and it was like this rapid, I don't even know how she did it. It was like a horrible case of restless leg syndrome. And she couldn't help herself. I remember different people in the class would be like, "Can you stop moving your leg like that? It's really distracting." And she would try to buckle down and stop moving, but then 30 seconds later, it's just this constant movement. And I wasn't the best student, so I'd be, especially in math, I'd be trying to concentrate, and she's over there tap, tap, tap-a-rooing, and it's enough already. Would you stop moving? It seems to me that we're living in a culture a lot like that. We're living in a culture that can't stop moving. We're living lives where most of us are constantly in motion. We live lives that are in overdrive, where we're always busy. Our lives are filled to the brim. We're maxed out. We're living marginless lives, characterized by constant motion. And we can't seem to figure out how to slow it down. We can't seem to figure out how to turn it down, so we just keep going. And perhaps in its worst form, we're actually rewarded for this. So this overscheduled, overcommitted way of life is in some respects seen as a sign of importance. If you have a full calendar or a full schedule, it's an indication of importance. The important people are those who are really busy. We're a culture that has restless leg syndrome. And of course, I'm not the first person to point this out. Many sociologists have been highlighting this for a long time, including how this is negatively impacting our lives. We're living lives of incessant work, of overwork, and as a result, we're struggling with burnout, overwhelming stress and anxiety, and improper or poor work-life balance. So people are working an insane amount and they don't know how to turn it off. They don't know how to distinguish between the workday and home life. They just take it with them home. They don't know when they've accomplished or achieved enough, so they just keep striving. And even when they accomplish something, they don't know how to rest and celebrate. They're just on to the next thing, the next goal. You know, I had hopes for a little while that COVID was going to help us here. Because we're living in this culture of constant motion and activity, and you'll remember when COVID hit, it basically caused the world to shut down. I mean, not completely. If you had young kids and all of a sudden they're home during the day, now you're a teacher, that wasn't fun, you know, and those in the healthcare profession, it wasn't slow down at all, it was like speed up. But for a lot of people, what the pandemic did is it shut things down. And there was an initial scramble to how are we going to keep going when we're working from home and all of that. But I remember having conversations with people. And they're like, yeah, as awful as it is and all of that, I got to kind of confess, this is kind of nice. Like I'm getting time with my spouse. I'm getting time with my kids. Like we're enjoying time together. Time we otherwise wouldn't have. And I remember people sharing with me, you know, when the world opens back up, I don't want it to go back to the way it was. We're just so busy and crowded and our schedules were crammed full of activities. I really like this slower pace. And yet here we are in a post-pandemic world for the most part. And it seems to me that we've just returned to our pre-COVID busyness in a state of constant motion. Yeah? So how did we get here? And like what cultural forces are at play that are like sucking us into this being our default setting, this setting of constant motion? I want to submit to you that what's driving this constant motion, what's underneath this is an idol of productivity. We've made an idol of productivity and efficiency, and now we've become enslaved to it. So think about technology for just a moment. There was a time when most of the technological innovations, when they were first coming out, people believed that they were going to save individuals so much time, we wouldn't even know what to do with ourselves. We wouldn't even have to work very much. We laugh at this, right? Because it obviously didn't pan out that way. But we have to get underneath, why didn't it pan out that way? Why didn't the technological advancements actually lead to more leisure time the way they anticipated? And the answer is because we're enslaved to productivity and efficiency. Let me give you two examples. When the washing machine first came out, Cameron and I were talking about this. When the washing machine first came out, this was at a time when there were more traditional gender roles, it was believed that it was going to save women tons of time. And it did do that, right? The time it would take to manually wash clothes took a lot of time. So it was believed, okay, the washing machine is going to like do away with all of that, and women are going to have all this free time. The problem is that what ended up happening is it just meant more clean clothes. See, before that time, people would wash their clothes maybe once a week or after several usages, but now that it's so easy, I can have clean clothes after every time I wear something. And so what ended up happening is women just did more laundry. You see how this works? This invention that was designed to save time just increased expectations of cleanliness and led to more volume. Increased efficiency, increased productivity. The same thing I submit to you happens with email. When email first came out, it was like, wow, this is going to make communication so quick and so easy. And it does do that, right? The problem is though, now that it's so quick and easy, what's built into it is an expectation that you respond faster. And then that leads to a higher volume of communication between people. So now they say that if you're good at email, that just means you'll be doing more email. Underneath this is an addiction to efficiency and productivity. We leverage technological advancements that were designed to give us space to simplify things, to be more productive. If you want a perfect picture of our enslavement to productivity, look at Amazon. You drive down 94 to Chicago, and right around Kenosha, you'll see this Amazon shipping facility on the left-hand side. It stretches for like a mile long. Like, this building doesn't end. And then you look across the freeway on the other side, and there's another company with an equally long building. That's Uline, and they make the boxes that Amazon uses to ship their packages. So between the two of them, they have nonstop, efficient productivity. Guess how many packages Amazon ships each day? 1.6 million. That works out to about 66,000 per hour, or 18.6 per second. So the time that I'm speaking this sermon, there will be about 33,000 packages that are sent out. In 2021, Amazon shipped an estimated of 7.7 billion packages globally. That's almost one package per individual on the planet. Now, here's what's crazy, is that 4.75 billion of that 7.7 billion was in the US alone. So we are responsible for like 2/3 of all that shipping, of all that consumption, of all that productivity. We're living in a restless society, a society that can't stop, one characterized by constant motion. And my goal in naming this is just to help us open our eyes and see this. We've got to learn to have eyes to see the things that are shaping us, because this is how culture formation works. Our culture has a set of values, some very explicit, some more implicit, but what happens is they act on us, and we're often not even aware of it. It's sort of like a frog in the kettle. We're just kind of used to these values. They seem normal. We're accustomed to them, but meanwhile, they're shaping us in a direction. And I want to submit to you that our culture is largely driven by an idol of productivity, and as a result, we've become a restless society. Now, there's good news and bad news about this. I'm going to give you the bad news first, because quite frankly, every time I've had to give good news and bad news to someone, they ask for the bad news first. It's like, just hit me with it. So here's the bad news, is we're living in this restless society, and as a result, we're weary and worn out. We're burnt out and exhausted, and we feel like we can't do anything about it. I talk to people about slowing down, people who are overwhelmed and tired. And oftentimes they just confess this helplessness, this powerless to know how to operate any differently. That's the bad news. We're victims of this pace of life, and we often feel helpless to know how to do it any differently. But here's the good news. The good news is that God sees this. He sees exactly where we're at. And this isn't the first time his people have been stuck in a culture like this. So he's not sitting there with a lack of imagination for how to free us and deliver us. And that's exactly what God wants to do, is he wants to deliver us from this restlessness that marks our society. So here's our bottom line for today. If there's one thing you walk away with, let it be this: the practice of rest frees us from anxious productivity into rhythms of divine grace. When we practice rest, it frees us from anxious productivity into rhythms of divine grace. Notice the from and into dynamic. When you practice rest, it frees you from something. It frees us from this cultural restlessness, but it also frees you into something better, into rhythms of divine grace, into the rhythms God designed for you to live into. So to get at this, I want to look at the story of the Exodus in Scripture. The story of the Exodus. And I want to acknowledge that I'm indebted to a very famous Old Testament scholar named Walter Brueggemann and his work called Sabbath as Resistance. He wrote a book called Sabbath as Resistance. I read it in preparation for this message, and most of what I'm going to share with you in the next few moments is drawing on his expertise. So if I say anything that sounds smart, it isn't me, okay? But our culture is enslaved to the idol of production, and we're a restless society, and this very much mirrors ancient Egypt. Egypt, where Israel was enslaved to prop up endless production. Israel was enslaved. If you read the first few chapters of the book of Exodus, you'll discover the people of Israel were enslaved to produce bricks to build supply cities for Pharaoh. So the idea is Pharaoh has so much stuff. He's got so much wealth, so much material wealth, so much grain. He doesn't know what to do with it. So he's enslaved a group of people to build cities so that he can store his infinite surplus. This is a system built on labor where Pharaoh exploits people in the name of production. Pharaoh is a ruthless tyrant who demands endless production from people he has enslaved for cheap labor. He's building an economy around systemic oppression. And in chapter 5, Aaron and Moses are sent by God to demand their freedom. Let my people go. And here's how Pharaoh responds. Pharaoh said, look, the people of the land are now numerous, and you are stopping them from working. That same day, Pharaoh gave this order to the slave drivers and overseers in charge of the people. You are no longer to supply the people with straw for making bricks. Let them go and gather their own straw, but require them to make the same number of bricks as before. Don't reduce the quota. They are lazy. That is why they're crying out. Let us go and sacrifice to our God. Make the work harder for the people so that they keep working and pay no attention to lies. Notice how Pharaoh responds. The people of Israel are required to meet a certain quota of bricks per day. And Pharaoh responds to this request to let them go, this demand, by taking away an essential ingredient for making bricks, straw. Normally that would have been provided, and now they need to go out and acquire the straw on their own while meeting the same production quota each day. No straw for you. So just connect the dots here, you guys. Pharaoh is bowing down to the God of production and surplus. The people of Israel are enslaved to Pharaoh, and because they're enslaved to someone who's bowing down to the God of productivity, they're forced to worship at the same altar. Because Pharaoh is worshiping this God, they're not able to rest. They're the means to productivity. So if you're an Israelite living at this time, you don't know rest. You don't get a water break. You don't get to catch your breath. You don't get to go stand over at the water cooler and talk shop. That's not part of it. You don't get paid time off. There's no PTO. There's no rest. There's no sick day or personal day or paid vacation. They don't know anything about that. There's nothing but frantic activity in an effort to meet the incessant demand for more productivity. This is the culture that they're living in. Is it any coincidence that one of the things ancient Israel is known for is their pyramids? Like, what a perfect picture of here's Pharaoh at the top, and he's sitting at the top because he's enslaved a group of people who are building the materials that put him there. You following this? So let's fast forward. Israel's enslaved in Egypt to a person who's worshiping the God of productivity, forcing the entire culture into a state of restlessness. And what does God do? He delivers the people of Israel. And fast forward, he takes them through the Red Sea on dry ground. They wander for a little bit, but they end up at a place called Mount Sinai. And it's here that God enters into covenant relationship with the people of Israel, a relationship. And his goal is really simple. He wants Israel to be his people. He wants them to reflect who he is in the world, to be a light to the nations. He wants to bless them so they can be a blessing to other people. But before they can do that, he needs to tend to their spiritual formation. He just got them out of Egypt, but now he needs to get Egypt out of them, because they don't have an imagination for what it looks like to reflect who God is. All they know is slavery. All they know is exploitation. They don't have a vision or imagination for what it means to be a just and righteous community that loves God and loves each other. They don't understand that. And this is what the purpose of the law is. We often think the law is just all these rules that Israel was forced to follow, but it wasn't that. It was giving them an imagination to be a just and righteous society who reflects God in the world. This is what the Ten Commandments and the book of Leviticus are all about. So, I want to look at the fourth commandment with you. There's three that precede it that have to do with God. Don't worship any other gods. Don't make any image. Don't misuse his name. Then the last six have to do with how we treat one another, neighbors. But the longest one is the fourth commandment, and it's a bridge between the first three and the rest. And here's what it says. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. In other words, it's for everybody. It's not just for those at the top. This is for everybody. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that's in them, but he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Walter Brueggemann points out a couple things that I want to share with you. The first is that he names is that Yahweh is a Sabbath-keeping God. Yahweh is a Sabbath-keeping God. Notice that the Sabbath command is anchored in God, It's anchored in who God is and how God operates. God is the example here. God rested on the seventh day. And notice there's a strong contrast between who God is and how God operates and who Pharaoh is and how Pharaoh operates. God isn't a workaholic. God isn't addicted to productivity. God isn't nervous about what happens if he rests. Will the rest of the world get on okay? God is not like Pharaoh. God is altogether different. The restfulness of Yahweh stands in contrast to the restlessness of Pharaoh. Pharaoh is addicted to productivity. He's a productivity demanding tyrant, but Yahweh is a Sabbath keeping God. And this has direct bearing on the people of Israel. When they're enslaved to Pharaoh, they're not able to rest. But now that they're coming underneath the lordship of Yahweh, now that they belong to Yahweh, they're his people, they're invited to rest. And this leads to the second observation, that Yahweh is also a Sabbath-giving God. Yahweh is a Sabbath-keeping God, but he's also a Sabbath-giving God. And in fact, God invites the people of rest to step into his rhythms of work and rest. And so now this people who have never received a break, who have never received a timeout, are given permission to do just that. A group of people who have never had a personal day or a sick day or a paid vacation are now given an opportunity to do just that. This is why, you guys, Sabbath isn't just a rule to be followed. It's not like a command that, oh, this is awful. Imagine if you slaved away for 400 years and someone said, hey, you get a day off. That would be perceived as a what? A gift. This is a gift. But it's also an act of resistance, because it's an alternative to the system that Pharaoh had put in place. They're being freed from their bondage to productivity into rhythms of grace, into rhythms of rest. Walter Brueggemann says, God's rest bestows a restfulness that contradicts the drivenness of the system of Pharaoh. And see, God wants the same thing for us. We're living in a culture that mirrors ancient Egypt. We're living in a culture that worships at the altar of productivity. A culture that's in constant motion, never pausing, never resting, never ceasing. And this is bondage, you guys. All the hustling and running around, all the pushing and prodding, all the grasping and grabbing, it leads to, it's slavery. It's bondage. It's not life-giving. And I'm convinced that God wants to free us from this. But to learn to rest, we need to actively resist the restless productivity in our culture. If we're going to learn how to rest, we need to learn how to actively resist the restless productivity in our culture. This is why Brueggemann calls Sabbath a resistance, because you're resisting the culture-shaping influence of the society around you. When you take a break, you're actively resisting in a culture that doesn't know how to take a break. You following this? Rich Velota says we keep Sabbath not because it makes us more productive at work. We keep it to resist the idol of productivity. We are more than what we produce. Friends, you are not a human doing. You are a human being. You are more than what you can produce and accomplish and achieve. And entering rest on a regular basis cultivates a resistance against a culture that tells you otherwise and allows you to enter into freedom. And the first thing you're going to experience as you start to practice a Sabbath in your life is you're going to feel a sync up. You're going to feel synced up with God's rhythms. Remember, God rested on the seventh day. You're gonna immediately feel in alignment with your Creator, that this is how God created you and designed you. You weren't just designed to work nonstop. You were designed for rhythms of work and rest. And you're gonna feel integrity, alignment with the way you've been designed. But then, as you get into it, I'll tell you what will happen. You'll also experience freedom. Because once a week, I have to say no to the problems and the challenges that haven't been resolved from the week. And I have to surrender those to God and go, God, these are yours. And you can be at work fixing these problems and these challenges in my life, even while I rest. Once a week, you have to stop working on the challenges and problems of your life and actually surrender them to God and go, God, I'm going to entrust these into your care while I rest in your love. And then what happens is as you do that, week after week after week, is you bring that posture of restful trust into every area of life such that you're able to respond to the challenges during your work week in a different way. This is why Brueggemann says people who keep the Sabbath live all 7 days differently. He says it's not just the pause that refreshes, it's the pause that transforms, such that you engage all of life differently. People who practice Sabbath learn how to trust and rest in God no matter what's going on in their life. And see, I'm convinced we often don't even realize how bad we need rest until we actually take it. A few summers ago, I was given a sabbatical. I knew that I needed rest. I had no idea how bad I needed rest. And it probably wasn't until like halfway through that I realized, oh my goodness, like I needed rest more than I ever realized. The other thing that happens when you rest is you quickly become attuned to the things that are keeping you from resting. I remember one of those things for me was my phone. Part of my sabbatical was I basically had to put my phone away for 3 months. No social media, no contact with any of you or any staff. I basically used my phone only to communicate with family members. And it's kind of embarrassing, but for the first 3 weeks, I can't tell you how many times I just picked up my phone habitually to look at it because that's how accustomed I was. Numerous times a day, just taking out the phone to look at it, only to be like, what am I doing? And then about 3 weeks in, I actually got to this place where I wasn't doing that. I could just leave my phone without taking it with me, just leave it alone. And I realized as I got some distance from it that my phone was a constant source of stress and anxiety. I had no clue when I was plugged into it day to day, hour to hour. But most of the time when I picked up my phone, it's someone needing something from me. Some stressor, some problem, some this, some that. Most of the time I reach for my phone, it's creating some stress, some anxiety. And as I was able to get space from that for like 3 months, I found, wow, this amazing clarity that my phone is a rest robber. It robs me from rest. It robs me from rest. We often don't know how bad we need rest, and we often don't know the things that are robbing us from rest until we step into it. So I want to give you your homework for this week. These are your action steps. It's simply this: practice a Sabbath this week. Practice a Sabbath. Now don't tune out because I have some instructions for you. I want to give you some vision for how to practice a Sabbath so you don't have to learn the hard way. I'm giving you some vision, but this isn't like, I'm not trying to be overly prescriptive. So I'm just casting some vision. First, 2 things to avoid when you practice a Sabbath, okay? 2 ditches people fall into. One is just checking out. Okay, some people, when they start practicing a Sabbath, the way they enter into it is just by checking out from everything in their life. And there's sort of, I've noticed, a spectrum in how people do this. The checkout, for some people, it means doing absolutely nothing. Literally the entire day on the couch with potato chips watching Netflix. For other people who maybe wouldn't find that very exciting, they fill their day with fun hobbies. The entire day is filled with leisure activities. The problem with checking out like that, where Sabbath is just kind of like saying no to everything that is a pain in the rear in your life and stepping into whatever it is you enjoy, is that oftentimes we check out from God in the process. And that's definitely not what Sabbath is about. It's not about checking out from God. Some people, and here's the other ditch, in an effort to avoid that one, end up turning the Sabbath day into a day of spiritual hustling. So in an effort not to check out from God, they spend their entire day doubling down on spiritual practices and disciplines. They fast for the day. They pray for 3 hours, right? They read half of the Old Testament in one sitting and their eyes fall out, right? It's that kind of a thing. And underneath this, I've talked to people who do this, and underneath it, interestingly enough, is a fear that their Sabbath may not be spiritually productive, which is kind of ironic a little bit. That we try to make the Sabbath day productive spiritually. So in an effort to avoid those 2 maybe extremes, I want to give you some key ingredients for making a good Sabbath. The first key ingredient is disengage. Disengage from the demands of your everyday life. Parents with young kids, that doesn't mean your kids, okay? That's part of the challenge of practicing Sabbath with young kids. But work. This is not a day to check your email or to do a few things here and there. You disengage from work. And then maybe consider, what other things do I need to disengage from that will rob me of rest? Maybe it's chores or stuff around the house. Maybe you need to work ahead in order to not have to do that for a day. I've already alluded to this. Every single person that I know that practices Sabbath puts some restrictions around their phone. If you're going to make a good Sabbath, I'm just giving you this hint, you're going to have to put your phone down. Put it away. If that makes you nervous, maybe check it morning, noon, and night so there's no emergencies or whatever. Don't go on social media. It'll rob you of rest. Put it away. So the first step is just to disengage, for sure from work, but then do an audit. What else do I need to disengage from? That normally robs me of rest, that requires effort throughout the week. Secondly then, second key ingredient is rest. You'll find that just disengaging from work will give you emotional rest. But what I have in mind here is physical rest. On my Sabbath, I'll often try to sleep in. And, as long as the kids will allow. And some of you have young kids and you're like, that's not possible. I get it. Do your best. But prioritize some extra rest. If you can't sleep in, get a nap in. Or oftentimes I'll do both. I'll sleep in and take a nap on my Sabbath, right? But prioritize physical rest. Just slow down how quickly you move throughout the day. Slow it down. Learn to rest. Adjust your cadence. Third key ingredient is connect. And what I have in mind here is create some space to connect with God. And it doesn't have to be like a grit your teeth and do something you don't enjoy. Find a way to enjoy God's presence. Maybe that's a prayer walk or a hike outside in God's presence. My wife Josie loves to play the piano and sing worship songs. Maybe it's playing an instrument. Maybe it's journaling in God's presence and reflecting a bit or reading the scriptures or whatever. Do something that will help you connect with God and that you enjoy. You can enjoy his presence. 2 more key ingredients. The fourth is enjoy. Create some space for enjoyment. This is where the hobbies and the leisure activity can come into play. Is there something you really enjoy doing that fills you up? Do that. Do that on your Sabbath day. Your entire day shouldn't be filled with that, but that can be part of your day. We as a family will often start with a devotional when we start our Sabbath, so we're getting spiritually centered. We're having a conversation. We'll often make great food on our Sabbath. Right? We love good food, so we'll cook together and we'll make something that tastes great. Oftentimes we'll play a game or do a fun activity or enjoy a movie together, something that you can enjoy. And then the final key ingredient is start and stop. What day are you going to do your Sabbath this week? It doesn't have to be a specific day. For many people, it's Sunday. For me, it's Friday through Saturday. Our Sabbath starts Friday night. And it ends on Saturday. And for many people, they find it really helpful to go, it's going to start at this time. That's when I disengage from work. That's when I put my phone away. And it's going to go through this time. And here's what we're going to do during that time. So pick a day. When will it start? And when will it end? This is what Sabbath is about. It's a gift to you. That you may not be enslaved to the God of productivity and efficiency. And that as an act of resistance against a restless society, to live into rhythms of work and rest that God designed you for. Practice a Sabbath this week. That's all I have for us. Remember that Easter Jam is a week from today. It's a great opportunity to invite neighbors or friends or family members. We hope you can join us. And then 2 weeks from today is Easter. Same thing, invite any family members or friends to join you that day. Let's stand for closing prayer. Jesus, we thank you that you see our condition, that you see the restlessness in our lives, and that we're often hopeless and helpless to make it different. I pray that we would respond to your invitation to enter your rhythms of work and rest in a restless society. And that as we do, we would be filled up and rejuvenated, but we'd also reach a place of greater trust and dependency that carries us through our daily and weekly lives. For we commit it to you and we ask it in Jesus' name. And all God's people said, amen.